I want to start with a fun fact I found out about you. Apparently, you have noble blood.
Oh, God. How did you know that? I mean, where did you find that? It's not written in anywhere. Oh, God. I mean, I only know of this because when I was going to go to university, my father produced a little piece of paper that said I was related to Datuk Klana from Sungai Ujong. And that's how he got to Malay College. It's as noble as you can get with the Malays. That was a piece of paper that I wish I have today, but it's gone. But yeah, we're related. I mean, I would say I'm a noble blood. My mother's a commoner. So there goes my noble blood.
But your dad certainly lived a sort of noble life, right? He went to a special school with all these other classmates with their own servants, and he could recite Shakespeare.
How do you know? My God, you've done a lot of homework. This is like, thank you. Not many people know this. King's husband and I sat and talked about a project called Four Kings. My father did go to Malay College and he went to school with kings or would-be kings then. But he comes from a small village and poor. And he was a little bit embarrassed the fact that he had to wear a red jacket, or my grandfather would bring bananas to the gate, and whereas everything else was Rolls Royce or Bentleys and drivers. So although we were noble, we were not that rich. I was born in Johor, 58. Right. 62, 63, I was in Kuala Lumpur. 66, 7, we were in Ipoh. 68, I came to Penang. That gives my age straight away. So I've been here for 54 years.
And what was it like moving to Penang for the first time? Do you remember?
Yeah. I was teased at school because my Malay accent was very Southern Malay. Very polite, very gracious. And the Penang Malays were a bit rough in that, hang and aku and all that. So I was always teased at school, but I like coming to Penang. My parents love Penang, hence why they settled on here. He's from Negri, but I think I've loved Penang. I don't see anywhere else in the world that I would call home for this moment.
What was it about Penang and the Penangites that you love so much? I mean, I read an article where you describe real Penangites are arrogant, rude, confident, and proud of who they are.
Oh my God, you really have done homework. They're rude, they're arrogant, opinionated, but they love this island. It belongs to them. And we is such an important word here because it is a village. It's really a village. And I recently did a project. And I'm just so proud that this village came together. So I think Penang people take ownership of land. I believe even people in Sarawak is the same. In the whole of Malaysia, Sarawakans, Penangites, and Sabahans take ownership of land and pride.
And were you shy as a child?
I'm still shy. People don't know this, but there's always a yin and yang. It's true. I'm painfully shy, and I sometimes at parties. That's why I told you King had to hold my hand. And I'm terrified of public speaking. I'm learning it. I'm learning how to grasp it because it's my work. So it's like you just have to learn to get better. But I'm shy. And there's a dual personality somewhere. You're both shy, and people think I'm an extrovert. I'm not. I'm quite shy.
So you spent your, youth in Penang, then you went to London A-levels, and then you ended up doing town and country planning at Manchester University. Yeah. Why?
My father wanted me to be a smart, clever young man, and he had a job waiting for me in Penang. So after my A-levels, he wanted me to do town planning. And so there was either Manchester or Dundee, and Dundee sounded grossly cold. And so I went to Manchester.
But you wanted to do art in London, right?
Yeah, this one, yeah. I went to the same school as John Galliano. We used to same art class. I don't know, you may not know John Galliano, but he was such a big name maybe 10 years ago. We used to go partying, and he was like brilliant. There were 5 of us that wanted to go to St. Martin's, and I was the best art student in the class because the teacher used my work to show off everyone. And 1 year after I left, Galliano came to me in a bar and said, they use your work to teach us. But my father didn't want me to go to art school. So I hated him for a long while, but I realized why he didn't want me to go to the art school.
So after you finished your degree, did you feel like you wanted to stay back?
I didn't come straight home. I didn't. Okay, this is the first time I'm making a real public announcement. I didn't finish my degree. I failed one paper and I had to resit. And the professors and all wrote to me and persuaded me to resit. And I just couldn't bring myself to do it. I finished the 3 years. If I had sat for that one paper, I would have got my town planning cert. But no, I didn't. I just disappeared. I decided I was going to stay on. I lived off milk bottles and rice and tomato ketchup. I lost touch with my family. That really upset my parents. But I wanted to stay on. But after 1 year, I decided that I had to come back because my father sent a telegram to my sister in Finland. And I still remember my sister. At that time, there was no handphones or whatever. But telegram read, please tell Joe to come home. We love him. Oh my God, I'm going to be so emotional. For years, I kept that telegram because I think we all grew up with this Freudian baggage of father's love or mother's love. And that certainly was one of the first pivotal point of me thinking my father did love me.
As I understand it, your dad was always critical of you, right? He never had nice things to say, and it was always a difficult relationship.
Wow. How did you know all this? This is not public knowledge. My father was very critical. And I remember one time me asking him, why can't you just one day just say, well done? And this is after my first big show where I had Nora Mazuki and Aisha Ali, who 20 years later I thanked, wrote a glowing thing. And all he did said, oh, I would have done different. And he did say, like, why should I praise you so that you get big-headed? I carried this for maybe 30, 40 years that he never, ever said nice things, except 1 year before he died. Okay, I would be so emotional. 1 year before he died, I was looking after him. He had a stroke. We were walking to the swing and he said to me, I never made my money or my fortune till I was in my 50s. I know you will make it.
I mean, that was significant because before that you had done so many, many, many different things, right? You came back, you were a landscape gardener, you had baby lawn boom boom club, so many things.
Yeah, but I tell you, I think secretly he really admired me. And for the longest time, I had this film in my head that was going to be called Rain Trees on Brook Road. Brook Road is this old street in Penang with rain trees. And I imagined this film. I saw a scene where I would be driving back from the airport and my father had died and it was raining and I go through his things and I find my letters. And I've been carrying that images for so many years of my life. And then when my father died, I actually found a whole stack of letters that he had kept. I had imagined this in a film script in my head. And in those days, there were aerograms that we used to write. And there was a whole stack of me, very angry aerograms from, I was in San Francisco and I would write to him daily. It was a love-hate letter. It was like, how can you do this to me? And why didn't you do that? But at the same time saying, I love him so much. And the old man kept these letters. I'm a big one on, I don't know whether you know this film called Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. It's a Tennessee William. And I feel it so much represents my relationship with my father, or late father, that it was love that could never be told or love that he cannot say. So it's like, you don't talk about it, but you know that he loves you, and he knows he loves you, and you think he doesn't love you, but he does. So now at 62, I think my father did love me very, very much.
That realization came, I think, around in your 40s when your dad had a stroke. But I wonder, prior to that, do you have some kind of idea of what you wanted to do? Like, how did this very different job come about?
It's not so different, I think I'm lucky in my life. I have a photographic memory. I filed up everything in my head, names and songs and titles and melodies and images. And I remember there was a film that I saw called Les Enfants du Paradis, about children of paradise. And years later, I turned it into a title of a fashion shot. So, or Edith Piaf or Gaudi. And as a child, I would just file up images and things. And then you go through life and then it comes out again. The Secret Gardens. Every project I do now actually comes from years of me filing up in my memory bank things. That's why I keep telling all these people who want to be creative, start filing, start building your memory bank. That is your source of information. That's the source of your inspiration.
It sounds like you loved all kinds of art and you were just naturally drawn to it.
I don't know. Yeah, I would say that I just like everything from music to colors to fashion to fabrics to plants. And then you find slots for it in your head. Now, I feel that the best job is being a festival director because you can put it all in projects and you get people to do different things. So it is being able to rehash what you think you like or music or sounds and to work with people on it. So it's a dream job.
So before you became a festival director, you actually took over your dad's position as the Chemdyes Sdn Bhd. So you were working in textile chemicals for the first time. That must have been a shock.
Yeah, I remember like my father died. We had this big family meeting. I have an elder brother and my mother said, no, Joe, you have to do it. Then I said, no, I don't want. I want to do the arts. Me being stupid and naive and young. No, I want to do the arts. I don't want to. And I remember crying because I felt so pressured. And then my mom said that my father wanted me to do it. And so I'm glad I did, actually. It actually made a man out of me. I think being disciplined into going to a factory in the middle of nowhere where it's gray and dull and dusty. People work. There's accountants and there's factory workers and there's production staff. I'm still working there, although I'm not physically there every day. I think that taught me a lot about human relations. And my Chinese almanac guy said that I needed water in my element. And I think that's the reason why I'm so suited to that job, because it's chemicals. So hence I've never left that job.
So around 2001 as well, you do your first festival that failed. Can you share a bit about that experience?
Oh my God. I've never spoken again publicly about this. No? I was asked to do a festival by the authorities. And then what I didn't know was they already decided what it was going to be like. So me with my grand ideas, it didn't gel. And I remember being so ashamed and embarrassed and out of my depths. And I had a poster of that festival somewhere. And it was to remind me of my failure. Like I designed this what I thought was a nice poster, but I couldn't put it all together. So this is not public knowledge that I failed miserably as a festival director in my first go.
But when you say fail, was it by your own standards or by other
By
people's
anyone's standard, by everyone's standard, by anyone and everyone's standard. I just failed big time, really big time.
Wow. And so after that, in 2008, 7th of July, that's when Malacca and Georgetown were jointly inscribed as UNESCO World Heritage Site. And I believe 2008, 2009, they asked you to come on board and help to run a one-day celebration festival.
I was asked and I was given, I think it was 8 days. The first one, they said, let's do a celebration. Can you think of something? And I pulled together a show called A Musical Journey of Penang. And I called every singer that I know who's old, who sang before, from retired rock Malay bands to opera singer. And I remember having Shafina singing Tanjung Penaga for me with a 40 choir, all rehearsed in 8 days. And just last week, I rehashed and revised Tanjung Penaga. And it's something that I will treasure. You know? It's Tanah Pusaka, but I got Tan Sri Ahmad Marikan's permission to change to Tanjung Penaga, which is the old name for Georgetown. I mean, I carry this love for certain things.
I mean, it seems so incredible. I brought all these people together in 8 days. That's not easy to find these people and get them to free their slot at the same time to do that thing.
I don't know how I did it. Honestly, I really don't know. I fell out with a famous singer because she was supposed to do the arrangement for music. He wanted to charge me 10,000 for an arrangement. I thought it was crazy. Anyway, and then I got a person who helped me until today. And I remember I had this vision of a backdrop and it was like 30, 40 feet high. So I sketched this, got the carpenters to do it, and we did the scaffolding. And the day of the show, the rains and winds came. I remember climbing up, holding on, and there was about 8 volunteers, all holding on for our dear lives, hoping that the prop didn't fall down. And I remember telling myself that I would leave the country and never come back because it was so dangerous. But this is something I always like, I'm fearless, or I just need things done and I will do it, you know? That was like, wow, it's crazy. I mean, I was 20, 30 feet high because I wanted to have a backdrop of Georgetown, and it also had the town hall and city hall. So I had these people, I can't even remember. I think it was printed backdrops of Penang because I see it and I want it. I'm one of those crazy people that if I want something, I will just have to have it at all costs. I have to have it, you know?
So 2010 is when the Georgetown Festival was the first time they wanted it.
Yeah.
How did you get involved? I think there was a proposal that was called.
Wow. Okay. They called for proposal. There were 3 groups that sent in proposal. There were 3 cultural groups. I think the Penang Chinese All Clan, and there was an Art Alliance, and I think Penang Heritage Trust all sent in proposals, but that was 6 weeks before the actual festival, and the state had a budget of 400,000, and then everybody pulled out. And then Datuk Sri Maimuna, who was then the GTWHI head, asked me whether I could do something. And I remember saying this. I said, I've got an idea for a series of events, you know, because it's too embarrassing to call it a festival because it's just a series of events. And I think we did it in 6 weeks and a budget of 400,000. And it's surprisingly, you mentioned Tiong Hin, right? He's a good friend. And I remember I had heard that they wanted me to do it. So before that 6 weeks, I think maybe 2 months or maybe just slightly above 2 months, I hinted to him that if I did do it, he'd come on board. But I think we did the work in 6 weeks and half of the budget went into his show. How on earth did I ever do a festival, my first festival, getting money and not going to jail? And it was incredible. 6 weeks and a festival.
That was the thing that amazed me, that you had to plan for an entire month and you only had 200,000 after you took away that 200,000 for the play itself.
I think what I did was I just listed anything interesting that was happening. And I'll say this, you have to have friends. I remember Tiong Hin was one. I remember Glenn Gui. I hardly knew him, but I said, could you show your film? And another friend who dances for the Beijing Opera. And I said, would you come? So I made phone calls to people that I knew. Until today, I can tell you that I think one of the biggest, most important thing is goodwill, that people will do something because they like you or they support the arts. I think it's a very important factor in the arts, you know?
I suppose a lot of people listening would realize that, gosh, you have friends everywhere. How do you even get to know them such that you can pull them onto this event?
Somebody shared with me and he says, this is the manager of Akram Khan, which is a very famous dance company in London. This is one of the most unusual thing about Georgetown Festival was he said, you were always with people. You were always sat down with everyone and you talked to everyone. It wasn't a transaction where I come to perform and I leave. So I make a point to try to meet everyone and you become connected in spirit. It's like a camaraderie of friendship because you're working together. And I think that carries a lot of weight. It's like me and King. I'm forever grateful to King of Jong Hin because they were there when I needed them.
And I believe the chief minister also said, call me if you need any help.
Yes, the man really behind the festival is actually YB Lim Guan Eng because he knew that it was only 400,000 and he said, if you need anything, call me. And I must say, in the 9 years that I worked under him, he did respond to my phone calls and very fast. And he actually became my patron. And I think it would never be the same again anywhere. Nowhere in Malaysia, at least, was anyone ever given the freedom to curate like I did. He was backing me. I mean, everything was audited. I had to give reports and all that. But he never said no. There was a show once, and I remember recently, somebody told me a story about the last Georgetown Festival, how the state walked out from a performance, right, by Ida Reza, who's a dancer. And I said, well, the fault lies in that they have not pre-warned the state. I brought in a show called 100%. I went to see the chief minister and said, look, this is 100 people on stage that will actually respond to questions. And they may respond to questions about you being corrupted or you doing this or you doing wrong or they don't like the state. And how are you with that? And he was man enough to say, go ahead. And I think the show would have never happened anywhere else in Malaysia. So for that, I'm very grateful. He was supporting the arts without that major censorship thing. I'm very, very grateful.
You had that tremendous support, and I think you also did lots of research. You were looking at the Singapore Festival, you were looking at Johor and Malacca. What were the different elements that you were drawing out of them to put into Georgetown Festival?
I think, like we discussed earlier, wherever I do something, I do homework. And before me was the Johor International Festival, there's the Malacca Festival. There was also a festival in Kuala Lumpur done by JKKN that was called an international festival. I studied this first because they were locals. And then I studied Singapore, and there was a festival called the Sun Festival in Singapore that actually would have been 2 years older than us. They were 3 years old. And I was really naive. And I remember at a press conference saying, we're going to beat the Sun Festival. And this is a IMG-backed festival that had Sharon Stone and Berlin Philharmonic and all that. But I just felt as if they didn't have a strong narrative, no storytelling, just big names and money. And I felt that Penang hasn't got money, but Penang was going to tell a story. We're going to tell our story. Our city will be the canvas and we will tell our story. And I think it worked in that respect.
I think what's beautiful is that you feature a lot of local artists, but you also draw in the international artists as well. So what's the thought process behind bringing these international artists?
I was accused of not supporting the local artists for many, many years. Almost every year there would be a question or somebody would complain to the press or complain to Guan Eng. A never-ending stream of the locals saying that I did not support the local thing. And I always gave the same answer that I don't support an act because it's local or foreign. I support it because it's good. I don't want to be pushed into a criteria of I must have 10% Malay, 20% Chinese, 18% white, 9% German. I just picked what I thought was suitable about storytelling. And the reason why I brought in some of the international shows was actually to educate and expose locals that this is how you get big. There's one particular director that I brought in 3 times, Royston Abel. He did Manganea Seduction, he did The Kitchen, and he did Manganea Classroom. I felt that he is one of the best examples of how do you put traditional art on a contemporary stage for a contemporary audience. And his works have traveled, and it's been in Lincoln Center, it's open in Melbourne Festival. I wanted Malaysian cultural practitioners to look at that as a benchmark, but I failed. Not many Malaysian cultural practitioners saw that.
Why do you think they failed to recognize that?
I don't know. I mean, I'm very grateful to there's two young men who run a theatre group called Terry and the Cuz, and they would come up every show and they said, it's crazy why people in KL wouldn't come up and see these really, really big international shows, right? That plays in Saddles Wells and all that. And I thought, yeah, why don't people come? If I'm a dancer, I would come and see. And we have the University of Science here with theatre and theatre masters and performing arts masters. And yet the students didn't come. And the student tickets were at 25 ringgit. So why wouldn't you come to see what shows have traveled the world? So I don't know. In that respect, I failed. And I think it's because culturally, our people are not ready. We have to slowly go back to the drawing board and feed them maybe smaller amounts. I don't know. I'm learning. I'm going back to the drawing board and relooking, reimagining where I failed.
I mean, you mentioned 25 ringgit, but I believe that you always try to make around 80% of the entire thing free because you want more locals to come and experience everything that the festival has.
No, it wasn't 80% free. there was a certain percentage of the shows that were free and public because I felt that the public here not ready for, and it would be too elitist to have like 80, 100 ringgit shows and all that. So we tried to do a balance. I failed. I think that's one of my weak points. I failed in the formula. So I'm back my second shot of how to make it work.
So 2011 is when Ernest Zakharevich first went to Penang. And how did you first come to hear about Ernest? Because you then got him, commissioned him to do a series of art pieces for the next GTF in 2012.
No, actually, he came to me. He was already in Penang. He did a wall actually just down the road from my office, a huge wall that nobody took any notice. He came to the office with this very interesting proposal of what I felt was very relevant, interesting, and he did a lot of homework. He picked right walls, he did storytelling on walls, and it was just magical for him and for the festival. I'm very grateful that he came, and I think it's been probably the most number of eyeballs we've ever had. But the sad thing about it is that everybody uses that as a benchmark, and it's mural, mural, mural. Like, I just wish the younger artists would look at other mediums, look at what's happening now with NFTs and digital art or whatever, rather than just be one-dimensional with murals. I'm glad it's giving a lot of mural artists work, though. Everywhere in Malaysia now, every small city, Taiping and Kampar. And I think it's good because artists are getting work. But I'd like Malaysians to think out of the box, not copy, be ahead of the curve, lead the curve, change the curve as opposed to just follow. And I think we are very creative here in Malaysia, but because we've been taught to cut, copy and paste, because the cikgu says cut, copy, so they all do that. And I think this thing about being brave and being different is where we will be different from the other art centers in the region.
But back in that day, when Ernest first came on, mural art wasn't a big thing, right? It was something that was quite new. And that's when it exploded.
Yeah. I think it was just timely. I mean, it must be the stars for him and me that it exploded. There's also another parallel wire mesh sculptures that the state had a competition. I think it's called Malacca Georgetown, which was also very, very interesting, but obviously under-publicized, or people don't write too much about it. They just focus on the mural. But that came out almost the same time that actually made storytelling on the walls as a canvas. So wherever you go to Georgetown, you also see that it's like a living canvas. It's like a living museum. You see the stories as it is, and old houses. And although it's gentrified in a lot of ways, there's still a lot of the old that makes it still very charming.
How do you balance? I mean, that's one of the big criticisms, right? You have all these tourists come, there's gentrification over commercialization, but you still need that flow of traffic to come in and support the local community.
I think I would fight against numbers. I feel it's a wrong thing to look at numbers. Major cities like Boracay and Venice have learned that numbers kill the city. So then they've shut down. When people just look at millions or thousands of tourists coming in, they're not value added. So I like the idea of Bhutan, where people pay 500 US premium. And the measure of success in Bhutan is happiness. I kind of like how the world is going that way, I hope. So there must be a measure of quality and balance as opposed to just numbers. It's like now, like you get influencers just get numbers and people are just milking out rubbish, really. It's scary that the world's becoming Kardashians.
But apart from all that, there's also the more meaningful parts. Like one of the things I loved was 2012, you started the Student and Community Tickets project. How did that come about?
I've always felt it's important to allow people who are less privileged. And I think I've got two soft spots, single mothers and children or orphans. I think it comes from my father. So we've always had like 10% of all show tickets being given to slightly differently abled people. I love the terms. I read it. I'm going to use that. It says differently abled people as opposed to disabled. So every show, we get people to donate and we convert the $25 tickets into community tickets. So people who poor artists, students, people who can't afford shows, people from homes, old folks. And I remember one time, like why I do festival, there are two occasions. One, there was a show called Gala. It's by a very famous French choreographer. And he put 20 people on stage. And the 20 people were differently abled people who were individuals, fat, thin, people in a wheelchair. And then we had invited some children from home and they were on a wheelchair. And then halfway through the show, this boy in a wheelchair got up and started screaming and going like that. And I thought, oh my God, get the boy out. He's uncomfortable. He wants to go out and all that. But after the show, the teacher said, my God, the boy was so happy. Another show was this show called Mangania Seduction. And I remember that year we lost a lot of money. And Narelle, who owns Bonton, said to me, Joe, people like you. If you put a collection box out there, people will give you money. So we put out a box and I was going to lose 300,000. I remember that. And we didn't collect 300,000, but what moved me was one of the boys from an Indian orphanage took out $1.50 and put it in the jar. And when I asked him, why did you do that? He said, my teacher said you don't have money. And this is after you've written to big name CEOs that don't give you anything. This 8-year-old boy or however how old he was gave you all his money, So that's why I do festivals. The joy that you bring to people, and maybe one day one of these boys will be a dancer, producer, filmmaker, or just a happy person.